right, maggots. This is time for date boot camp. We're going to tell you what to do and what not to do during a date.
This is all strictly based on our opinions and experience. There's no research behind this. We're not liable for if you take our study and it does not go well. If it goes great, that's 100% all on us. We were the ones who did that.
Yeah, and after saying that intro, you guys aren't maggots. You're really cool. I just had to come in hot. But anyway, let's get into the business. So, Julian, what are the things that you are like, what are the fundamental pillars of a date in your eyes?
Well, the first thing is listening to Off the Top podcasts on all the platforms available, getting really warmed up and educated for the date. Fundamental pillars of a date. I think fundamental is just transparency and honesty. Like cardinal sin number one for me is don't fake it. Cause if you go on a date and, so the other person on the date expects you to be someone that you're really not, that's how things, trouble in paradise in the long term. I think about, just having fun. Dates are also an experience. Like I would say majority of a dates probably don't end up being, the love of your life, however that is, but it's an experience in some sort of way. You're putting time and effort into it. So at least try to make it a good time, regardless of the circumstances. Some things might come up, but just try to make it a good time.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I really like that you just said is, it's about fun and it's about having good times. I mean, you're not there to, advance your career, hopefully not, or it shouldn't be very serious. You're not going to court. The one thing that I would like people to be reminded of, make sure you put your best foot forward. And that is shown in a multitude of processes and that we'll touch on. But one of my big don'ts, and it's more of a general, just don't do it. Don't go to movies on first dates. I really don't care if she wants to go to a movie or he wants to go to a movie. Don't do it. The reason why is because there is no communication in a movie theater. You're watching a movie. You're not talking about, what interests you have or they have or, what you really is, you're not talking at all. And that's bad.
Yeah, and what you talked about putting your best foot forward, the thing a lot of people don't really think about it, say the date goes really well, and you guys just find out, you aren't compatible together, but you're still, cool friends or whatever, that's, from a business standpoint, that's just nice to have in your network. So say you go on a date and it goes really well and you guys aren't compatible, but, you guys can be friends or talk it out, you just couldn't see each other dating or being together long term, but maybe, the person that you're going on this date with, or you're working at a certain business and they know someone, they can put in a good word for you. So if you don't put your best foot forward or you try to stomp out the date as it's going bad, you're like, I'm going to make this worse or it's going to go worse. You could be losing out on some opportunities in the long run.
Yeah, and if that's if that's something that you do think about, then there's a lot more than there's a lot of different podcasts and therapists that you can talk to help you out with that. I mean, naturally, it's don't ever take it too serious as far as I'm concerned. It's about getting to know somebody and, having a good time. I've said it, probably 3 times at this point, and we're, less than 5 minutes in. But that's how important it is. I mean, nobody's going to be like, oh gosh, that was the best date ever. We were so serious the whole time. And I think I laughed once. And it was just because I farted and hoped that he didn't hear it. It's that's have fun.
Yeah, exactly. So kind of rolling into, dating, the dating scene. It's in today's generation, I think it's fairly easier to find a date, because I'd say 10 years ago, you're more so finding people in public, and now you have dating websites, dating apps, you can see mutual friends, you have social media, you have all these different opportunities to, so quote unquote, find someone you may be interested in or want to go on a date with. So you have the ability to find the avenue to go on a date. And it's all around you at all times. So it's really being kind of cognizant of maybe you find someone with a similar interest or someone you are interested in, you seem there's some chemistry. Maybe over the development of, a week or a couple of texts or whatever it may be, you kind of realize there's an opportunity to go out on a date.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with kind of the opportunity and the multitude of ways that people can find dates or go on dates. And I think it's very helpful for some people, especially, I mean, there's a lot of people that are shy, and understandably so. Rejection isn't like a fun thing. Like nobody's ever like, yeah, I got rejected, but it's a very normal thing in life. So you got to be used to it, but it kind of takes the edge off, going through Tinder, or for your case, you go farmers only, right?
Yeah, I really like blackpeoplemeet.com.
I thought that was a barbecue website.
There's some good cookouts on
Yeah.
there. The other thing I think about too is like shotgun dating, or like those dating. I don't know if they still do them, but I see them in movies like where it's everyone's in a big conference room and you have like 45 seconds to, impress someone and land a date at the end of the night. I always wonder what that experience is like. Like you have 45 seconds for two people to conversate, right?
That sounds like a Shark Tank like pitch. Like you're pitching your product and you're hoping Mark Cuban doesn't hate you at the end of it.
You know what? I'm out. And then you just got to keep moving on. And I think it's also interesting because there's just a ton of people in that room all kind of doing the same thing. So I wonder what would you do to stand out from, the guy who's like, well, I'm a doctor and my 5-year plan is this and I have a boat, or like, I'm a stand-up comedian. I like this. Like, what is making you stand out in that situation?
Good question. The thing that I would do first off is, there's a lot of things I do, but one of the main things is I would bring energy. For that 45 seconds, it would be very powerful, very like upbeat, and have a high energy level. And there's kind of a con to having a higher energy level, especially if you have a much higher energy level than the person you're trying to communicate with. So if you can do calibrating, then always put yourself about a decent notch above whatever energy level they're on. And the reason why is because they'll stay engaged. They'll find you more interesting, and they'll have a better time if they have to go up and meet your energy level compared to the other way. And also another thing that you need to do is like, you have 45 seconds. So it's not like you can warm up into anything. So you need to do a lot of like social warm up beforehand, just like, people warm up before basketball games or before, doing any exercise. That's the same when it comes to social exercise as well. So you got to make sure you have a good lather. Your body's nice and loose. You're feeling good. You have high energy, and then you just go in there and, be very, very, very full of life, very playful is what I would do personally. How about yourself?
I think it depends on the situation. Like if it's in, this large group and you can see everyone on date, it's like table next to table next to table. I'd just try to find a way to be different, whether it be like one table, maybe you're halfway through. It feels like maybe that table you're like, hey, would you like to go on a walk? So it's something a little bit different than sitting at the table the whole 45 seconds. So maybe it's just like getting up and doing a different atmosphere. Maybe it's switching seats. Maybe it's just doing some physical motion that's a little bit different than, what it seems everyone else is doing, so that it kind of stands out like, oh yeah, this one guy, got up and, we went on a walk, or, we switched seats, or we tried, mimicking other people's voices, or we did something else, along the lines that's something a little bit more different. Because you can think about anywhere you go, if you see someone doing something slightly different, you're more often to remember that than everyone in the same herd mentality.
Yeah, well, funny you mentioned that, because we had a great podcast on herd mentality about 2 weeks time ago, and I would highly recommend that people look at that one. I really enjoyed it. But yeah, you're right. You want to stand out, and another way of, invigorating and helping people feel a little bit more loose and fun is doing something physical. As your body and mind play this like follower leader thing, and sometimes your mind follows you, sometimes your mind leads, sometimes your body does the others too. And so when you kind of physically get loose, that actually helps mentally get yourself loose. And, if you're physically like dancing, like imagine being super serious and then just breaking out in a dance and trying to stay serious. It's hard to do. And so that's a very good point.
Yeah, so those are just some quick general looks at it. But now we're going to hop into just kind of a typical day, a step-by-step, what we would do, what we wouldn't do, and kind of see if you guys pick anything up and if any weird tangents come out of, our heads.
Yeah, so I guess I'll kind of give you guys a step through. So let's set the scene. I have this date. she little thing, full snack. And so what I first do is, obviously we're not going to the movies. We're doing something different. Another way, let's start out with this way. So something I usually do that kind of takes the edge off of dates, because a lot of people have anxiety towards dates, and, I feel like some of that's natural. So I casually will bring it up and casually invite somebody. For instance, I have a whole bunch of buddies, and sometimes we'll like go to like wine bars and go tasting. One time, everybody in the group ditched, and I wasn't really into looking like I was going to be going, at this bar or wine bar alone and just kind of like downing a couple glasses of wine by myself. So I said, hey, like, I am going to this wine bar. Me and my buddies usually do this. They can't make it. You should join me on, X, Y, and Z in place. And so that kind of takes the edge off, because it's not like you are formally inviting them. You're not bringing your butler and like giving her a letter and having her fill it out in front of him. It's like a very like casual and cool thing. So it kind of takes off some of the pressure, which, sometimes people have on dates. So let's say I'm going to this wine bar, and then what I'll do is, make sure I'm groomed. That's one thing that's very important. Make sure that you're freshly showered, especially if you just were sweating, working out. And so make sure all of that's taken care of, guys, because nothing, or girls too, in the matter of fact, you just don't want to be stinky, smelly, sweaty, any of that stuff that would be unattractive on a date. I mean, especially some people get nervous, and I've seen it before. Like, people start sweating on dates, and if you're going to be sweating already, like, make sure you showered first, so you have like the clean slate of sweat going. But to fast forward, groom, make sure that I'm socially warmed up, like I talked about before going out. Maybe be chatty. If you show up early, then, and be on time as well. Be on time or early. And if you show up early, then don't be afraid to like chat up people around. If you're at that wine bar, don't be afraid to like talk to the waiters, the waitresses, the people next to you too. It helps kind of get those juices flowing. So when, the person your date is coming or like gets there, that you're not like all of a sudden like, starting up an old motorcycle that you need to put the choke on for a little bit and then take the choke off. Like, you're already nice and warm, which is good. Another thing that I like to do is, like, obviously have the energy in the date, but also like, I always enjoy being the MC of conversation. And I know that sounds kind of weird to say, but, kind of guide the conversation or direct the conversation in each way. But don't be afraid to like, go off on certain tangents, because sometimes those tangents are actually really fun to, explore or go down, that random time that, you got stranded in the middle of the woods, and all you had is like a torch, and then you thought there was Bigfoot chasing you. Like, those things are pretty interesting and fun, and then you can learn a lot about people as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a lot of different steps you touched on in there, from one being like having proper communication in between like a formal and informal invite to a date. There's tons of ways you can do it. Just depends on, who you're asking, what their mood is, or how they react to certain things. So you could be super formal, like in person, or you could do a call, you could do a text, whatever it is. And then from there, kind of having a plan, right? You have a plan once you do that. And then you kind of go into the pre-date where, you're getting, groomed or dressed up or fitting the occasion properly and kind of putting your best foot forward at that point. And then like understanding, time frames and when to be there, and being, probably earlier on time, like you said, and talking to, whoever you're going on a date with and communicating with them. Like, are you picking them up? Are you meeting there? Where are you meeting? Is it a game to find each other there? Like, how are you, you don't really know how you're doing that or figuring that out. And then once you're there, just kind of like getting to like warming up, getting to know one another. If you haven't talked a whole lot, if you have, then you're probably right in full swing of things. And kind of just understanding the environment that day around you. So maybe you go to a place and it's super high energy and it's fun, or maybe it's a little bit more mellow, like a jazz bar or something like that. And kind of conversating and just kind of, relaxing and getting to know the person on the other side of the table or next to the table, or, rock climbing or what that may be.
Yeah, exactly. I think one thing that I didn't mention fully that you kind of touched on was choose your environment carefully. Like, obviously, I said no movies, and that example was a wine bar, but there's tons of places that you could go, regardless if it's a walk or, like a heavy metal concert. Like, there are times and places where you'd want that to be a date. Just know that it needs to be cohesive and best help augment what you're trying to do. If you're trying to, display that you're super smart and a library's the spot, then cool. I don't know if being super smart correlates or like is easily shown at like a Megadeth concert, but who knows? Maybe that's your cup of tea, and maybe you think that that's the other person's cup of tea. But yeah, very good point on choosing the environment carefully.
Yeah, and I think if you're one of those people who gets nervous or anxious or like uncomfortable for change beforehand, I think it's nice to, maybe visualize a little bit what's going on, or maybe think of some predisposed questions that aren't too boring, but maybe just a little bit more interesting. That way you kind of have a game plan and you kind of know where things are falling into place. The only downside of that is if it doesn't fall into place, you're probably going to get a lot more nervous. But just being able to relax and understand that like it's just a date, it's not like a job interview like you said earlier, and that you're trying to just make a good impression. You're just being you, and if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. And I mean, that's how life goes.
Yeah, 1,000%. Yeah, it's you want to be very good at not taking or not putting pressure on yourself. And so I think putting it in that perspective, and the fact that, this usually probably is a random person that you're going to meet, or somebody you don't know very well. So regardless if they like you or not is no judge on your character, who you are, how great of a person you are. It just means that, it just didn't work out. And that doesn't really, it's not good, bad, or in between. It's just what it is. So.
Yeah, and I think too, finding, like you said, the mood of the date itself. Like you could be in a high energy place and the mood is a little bit low key between you and the person you're on a date with is very important. Understanding how that person reacts to certain things, because I mean, I've seen or heard dates where people are just out like embarrassing themselves, and I can't tell, like, to me, I'd be like, yeah, that's embarrassing, but maybe to, the person they're on a date, that's like a hit. It's super funny. It's like, that their personality. So it's really like, you don't think about necessarily the others around you. You just think about like having a good time with the person you're with and kind of making that memorable experience. So if it is, embarrassing, but you guys are jumping into a fountain and doing some movie type romance stuff, great. Like if that's not how the mood of the date is going, then like you're doing something else. But it's just kind of, finding out and figuring out the rhythm of the day.
Yeah, certainly. Now that we've kind of talked about a few things that, I mentioned what my example was, and we talked about that a little bit. I'm really curious to hear your example of you stepping through one.
This is funny because I am not a romantic in any way. And I've been in a relationship for a good amount of time. Julian's tips to going on a date. Obviously, like, I'm more of a plan type of person. So like if I am the dominant in this thing, so maybe I'm the one who asks to go on a date or wants to go somewhere, and I'm the one who's kind of planning through that course. Because I think a pet peeve for some people could be like, say you get asked on a date, say Julian is asking you as a listener on a date, and then you're like, oh yeah, I'll go, and then I'm like, all right, tell me what you want to do. It kind of to some people could defeat the purpose. Like I think to some people it's nice to hear like, oh, do you want to go on a date? Like, okay, let's go to this 4-star Italian restaurant at for dinner, and then maybe we can go get ice cream, or there's this cool comedy club down the street or something, which I wish we had in this area, but we don't. So kind of setting up a plan is the first thing I do. And then from there, based on my plan, I'm kind of figuring out, maybe what the mood might be, or like what I'm wearing. More so what shoes I want to choose, because I'm a big shoe guy. I'm figuring that out. And then, if I'm picking someone up or we're meeting there, like I said, just kind of being early. If you are the one, I would say the dominant again, asking the person on the date. So like I would ask my girlfriend, hey, let's meet there today because we're like on far parts of town or something. Being the first one there so that when she shows up, I'm there and it's not her just waiting for me to show up. So like it's a little bit more of a mental thing, like, oh, he's there and he's prepared or whatever, and he's kind of got things situated. And then just kind of rolling through the date, just having fun, talking about, I'm more of a current topic person or just random theoretical stuff. I don't do like I don't talk about anything in the future. I don't talk about anything that's like you could find on the internet, like, so what's your job? What's this like? Blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's a little bit different. I've been in a relationship for a little while, but I've never been like a basic question asker because that can just make things pretty boring and repetitive and bland to me. And then just kind of having fun and seeing what opportunities to necessarily do something like different or an experience, whether it's like playing pool or air hockey or, I'm getting ice cream or something like that.
Gotcha. And so in that whole scenario, I just wanted to highlight on a few things and the fact of, being very thorough and thoughtful with your plans. And I mean, one thing also is like being punctual as well. It's very important to like we mentioned before, have a thought out process of what you kind of want to do and how you imagine it ending up. And I think that that's very important. The fact that you want to make sure, like, even if it's not a hard set thing, like have an idea of how you want the process to go. And also, I'm really curious. So if somebody like, what are your like freakum shoes? Like if you're trying to get them, what kind of shoes do you wear?
I don't know. That's a good question. I just have a lot. It just depends on like the color choice of the outfit or what I'm wearing, or, is it a highlight or is it a neutral? It's kind of tough to tell, but I do try to wear like a leather based shoe. It's a little bit nicer. I mean, I have a lot of sneakers. I don't have really any dress shoes. So like a leather based shoe, kind of fit a little bit more professional occasion. And once again, like I think a lot of things on dates is like putting your best foot forward. And it's all like a mental game. Like if you can get someone in, a positive mental state and their first impression and stuff is a positive mental experience, they're going to think of it in a positive way. But if your first impression and they come up and they're like, oh, am I a little, overdressed or something along those lines? It can put like a sour thought into the beginning, like, I can't believe we're doing this. I'm overdressed. Or, I can't believe he's wearing a pizza roll stained white tee to this restaurant or something.
Yeah. And I mean, so you mention it. One thing that I personally say to myself, and maybe will make other people feel better, is that I think that it's way better, and I choose to be overdressed than underdressed any day of the week. Just because it shows that, you're putting effort into something, you care about it, and that if you're underdressed, it shows, it leads to a lot more different things than just like you don't care about this situation, but you might not care about how you put yourself together in the first place. So don't feel worried if you're overdressed at all. It's better to be looked at as, damn, like he's bringing it or she's bringing it, rather than like, what is going on over there? Like he must have had a rough day.
Yeah. And I think too, when you talk about that and being like, if you're comfortable in being, super dressed up, that's great. You don't really have to communicate that, but maybe if you don't, you aren't someone that gets superly overdressed, or you don't have necessarily the right clothes to do that. So maybe it's important to, in your date, you're communicating like, hey, we're going to go, you have a lot of athletic clothes. Like, hey, maybe we're going to go on a hike or something after we eat dinner. So if you want to, wear some athletic based clothes, that way you're on the same page, instead of like, maybe you have the secret plan and you're wearing athletic clothes and he or she is super overdressed. You're like, oh, we're going on a hike. Like that, once again, is something that can deter the route.
Yeah, certainly. So now that we're wrapping up, I'm really curious, Julian, what are some of your pet peeves on dates?
I don't know. I'm a weird person. I don't know if I have a whole lot of pet peeves. I have a lot of more like analytical stuff. So like maybe if I see someone doing something like moving their knee a lot or like, tapping the table or something, I don't think I'm going to get pet peeved about it, or like them talking about, it's hard because I've been in a relationship for a while, but say so-and-so is talking about, a past experience or something. I don't know if I'd get necessarily pet peeve, but I'd more from an understanding point. Like, okay, maybe they're nervous, maybe they're cold, maybe, they're still emotionally attached or whatever it was. Figuring out that for myself and then kind of processing that over time. Then, because I think about if having a pet peeve or a known pet peeve going into somewhere, it can make things a little bit more upsetting as it happens throughout a date.
Gotcha. So it's just more, you're very, you notice things. And I think that that's a good point. Like people, it's not hard to notice like certain energies, especially if it's a nervous energy. People are tapping their knee or like doing something it's easy to pick up on. And so just to say it in my perspective, there's a few things that I have pet peeves about. One is like timeliness. Like if you're really late and you don't give a heads up, that's pretty, that's first strike, as in like, oh, like this person doesn't have a good sense of time, which means they might not value their own time. And even worse, they don't value mine. Another thing, and this is kind of a silly one, but I'm not a fan of like adults talking like they're children, like baby talk. Like I've heard this one, and I think this person listens to this podcast and they're going to know, but something that annoyed me is people, or this one person would say, like talk about avocados and call them avocadis. And I'm like, dude, that's the worst. That is literally the worst.
Do you have any? So those are your two?
I mean, I'm sure I have more, but right now off the top, that's all I got.
Yeah, I think it just depends on who you are as a person in a date. Like just figuring out who you're asking on a date, being prepared, kind of understanding the situation. You should be fine. Like I think the best mindset to have for a date is that at the end, it's not going to work out. So that way, if it does work out, it's a surprise. And I mean, as weird as this sounds, if, to me, dates are like basically, say you're hanging out with your friends and, that energy you have in that environment, it's always going to change. It's basically the same thing. You just aren't calling it a date. You're just, on a little bit more formal scale or informal scale, but you're still just trying to have that same energy and have a good time. And that, to me, that's going to lead to a better outcome than like really overthinking everything, every process, just kind of, going through it and trying to have as best time as possible.
Yeah. And like you kind of mentioned, I think that these things that we've talked about can be more universal than just a date. So, don't be afraid to socially warm yourself up or, be timely or, think about what kind of interaction do I want to have with this person, or like, what's my goal? Do I want to create a friendship? Do I want to just have a buddy that I can like shoot hoops with, or, that type of friendship? So, use these as more of a life in general thing than just specifically on dates. Yeah.
I hope you guys enjoyed this on whatever platform you're on. Go ahead and send us an email at theoffthetoppodcast@gmail.com. Give us some comments. Tell us about your bad dates or your good dates or what you find successful, and we'll share them to our listeners.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.